New York real estate has always been a white man's world, but to understand just how hard it is for women and minorities to make it in this business, The Real Deal in January 2017 took an in-depth look at this issue. How did you guys decide to really take a big, sort of exhaustive look at this issue that everyone's known about, everyone's talked about here and there, but never really explored? Liz?
I think there's not a day that goes by that you don't see a story about race and gender and how it affects another industry. Mm-hmm. So we just thought to ourselves, you know, why don't we put the microscope on real estate? And we've never talked to our players in real estate about this issue. How do they feel about it? Is this something that troubles them? What's the water cooler conversation that goes on about race and gender? Is
there a major distinction between the residential and the commercial worlds when it comes to this issue?
I think so. I think residential tends to be a completely different game from commercial. The breakdown is really roughly half women, half men.
And that extends in residential to leadership positions as well, right? You have Dottie Herman at Elliman, Dan Ramirez, and as well Pam Liebman, right? So there is leadership. But you guys had this amazing stat on the commercial side, which is in senior positions, 86% of the positions are occupied by people who are white, and 80% of the positions are men. That's really the issue, right? When it's at the leadership level, it trickles down.
Right. It's a startling statistic, and I would say that it's not very different from Wall Street.
It's telling that the people who actually spoke on the record about this issue are people in positions of, you know, very, very high power. So you had Marianne Gilmartin, you had people like Marianne Tai. These are people at the top of their field, so they don't really have as much to lose. But I guess there were junior people who weren't as comfortable.
We heard a lot of reticence about rocking the boat, where there were people who probably had a lot more to lose by making it an issue, you know, outside of what many see as a business issue.
And you guys spoke to Don Peebles as well, right? He's one of the most well-known developers in the country. There was an amazing anecdote in there about him trying to get a construction loan for a project and suffering a hiccup because of a small lawsuit.
Yeah, we heard from minorities across the board that access to capital was a real sticking point. It was a real high barrier to entry that they had to face. Peebles had this anecdote about a loan he was going for on a project, and his lender was grilling him over a 15-year-old lawsuit in the amount of $500,000, I think. Something insignificant to his balance sheet, but he said that they made a much larger deal over it than they normally would have. He told another story about a property he was bidding on, and the sellers wanted to see not only that he had the money for the deposit in his bank account, that he had it in there for a significant amount of time.
Which is completely unusual, right?
Which is something he said he had never heard of anything like it before.
Where are these blocks coming from, Liz? Is this just a function of a very, very insular, cliquish group dealing with each other over and over the decades?
I think it's true, you know, that old saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And it's about commonalities, and a lot of that is about cultural commonalities. It's who they go to synagogue with, it's who they socialize with.
But when it comes to gender, then those things don't necessarily apply, because a lot of women in the industry are facing discrimination in some form. But they might be part of the same circles. But when they go out there, they face some challenges, correct?
Something we didn't get into, but perhaps we should have, was the whole kind of after work hour scene at bars, at sporting events. There was one woman who told me that she was never given an opportunity to take her clients out to like a Giants game or a Yankees game. And she often wondered why. She thought that was strange. And basically what she had to do was she had to take her clients out to the Philharmonic. And that's a pretty tough thing for, if you think about it, you can't talk.
Hard to talk deals at.
How do you talk deals at a concert?
I spoke with some women who talked about business decisions regularly being made at late night meetings. You know, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, when you know, working mothers would have to be home taking care of their families.
I guess the question is, what is the industry doing to address this issue? Is it doing anything at all?
Not that we found. I mean, I think that someone said to me, this isn't an industry that likes disruptions. And I think that's true. I mean, we were talking to a lot of people, and we were trying to find, like, who is the change agent in this industry? Who is the equivalent of
a Sheryl Sandberg or something, right?
Exactly.
Right.
And we're not sure who that is. I think that women like Ty and Gil Martin have done a lot to speak on behalf of women and also to kind of testify to how they were able to make it. And that means a lot to have, like, we spoke to several people who told us that it's very meaningful to have a minority or to have a woman role model.
But that's the important distinction, right? They are taking essentially the role model approach, which is like, I can serve as an inspiration for, the next generation. That's different from actually addressing the problem, because they made it in that cutthroat, male-dominated world.
On the one hand, a lot of the women who have made it to the top, who have made it to the C-suite, recognize that there is a bias that exists. But kind of their way to address it is just to say, you work as hard as you can, you ignore that, and eventually you'll get to where you deserve to be. And I think that kind of ignores the fact that not everyone's at a company where they have a support system that's going to allow that. And not everyone has the stability to be able to leave a company like that to find one that will. And then kind of the other advice that's usually given is like, well, like when I started my own company, and now I don't have to worry about that because I'm my own boss. And again, not everyone can do that.
That's financial independence that you need. Is REBNY doing anything about, addressing the gender and race issue?
I think that when REBNY appointed John Banks as the first African-American president, everyone sort of looked to him and thought that he may be that change agent. But then we've heard a lot of people who said that it's not the responsibility of the first black person in that job to change the culture, that it really is on the owners, on the executive board members to institute sort of that top-down.
And did you guys talk to, say, the families that, the sort of the dynasties that control so much of New York?
I spoke to Larry Silverstein, and he kind of just said that it wasn't something that they specifically went out to do to, create a diverse company. He basically just said they were picking, based on who would do the job best. So, I mean, it doesn't seem like anyone's like really coming out and saying like, we are moving forward and trying to create as diverse a company as possible.
Are there any initiatives that people are doing on?
I thought that anecdote about David Kramer, I think he really deserves a shout out because he's offering a maternity benefit, or I should say it's like a parent benefit that is like on a tech level, like a Google level. And I think that's rare in in any New York City based industry. Paid
time leave of 3 months for both the father and the mother.
There was something about, in the story, I had the baby on a long weekend so I could be back on Tuesday, which was just amazing. It just sums it up.